Hi everyone, Larice here. Welcome to the Cubicle Coach. If you watched my intro video, you know that the Cubicle Coach is a space that I've designed for professionals who want to create a more fulfilling work life. And for my first video, I'd intended to talk a little bit about the foundations of self-coaching, and I still will talk about that because self-coaching is a really important skill that we should all have and can continue to build throughout our careers. However, with the current state of the world, I thought it would be a really great idea to have a conversation with one of my really good friends and experts in the inclusion, diversity, and belonging space on what people can do during this time. I've gotten a lot of questions from my peers, from my colleagues about what they can do to support me as a Black professional. And I often find myself just without an answer. So I asked my really good friend, Nuhami Waldemariam, to give us a little bit of insight on what allyship is and how professionals can be allies to their peers in times of tragedy and injustice. I hope you find the conversation to be informative and helpful, and share with a friend. Hi, Nuhami.
Hello.
I feel like this is not a good question anymore, but how are you doing?
I am taking it one day at a time.
That's been my response to literally every person who's asked me. And it's true. I'm taking it one day at a time.
Yeah. And also giving myself space to have all the emotions.
Oh my gosh. Yesterday, I opted out of a meeting so that I could take a nap, which is what I needed at the time. So, yes. Well, I'm really happy that we are taking some time to have this conversation. I think this is a really important conversation. As you know, I was intending to launch the Cubicle Coach as a space for professionals to get tips and best practices on creating a work life that they can feel good about. And right now, in our current climate, feeling good at work means something different than what I anticipated when I wanted to launch. And so I want to talk today to you about allyship, what that means, specifically because I have gotten so many questions from my peers who are checking in, which I appreciate. My colleagues who want to see how I'm doing, they also want to know what they can do. And more often than I care to admit, I don't have an answer for them. And so I thought I want to use this time and this platform to educate. So thank you again. Is my best friend and my diversity, inclusion, and belonging and equity expert. So I'll start with like the foundational question. What is allyship and what is it not?
So the way that I think of allyship is framing it in a way that it's proactive, right? This is an ongoing and incredibly difficult practice. I usually say it involves a lot of unlearning and evaluating. I will say that it's not an identity because this is a lifelong process. It requires building relationships, and building relationships requires trust. The trust requires consistency. I also really believe in accountability, right? And so accountability with marginalized individuals or groups of people. When I think about allyship, I would love to share some key points that helps me sort of bust some myths that are out there, if that's helpful.
Yeah, that is helpful. Please do.
Okay. One thing is the understanding that anyone can practice allyship. This isn't made for only one particular group. Every single person can practice it, no matter what group you belong to or identify with. Advocacy as an ally takes different forms, and so what I always share is asking the person how they would like to be allied to, and not necessarily making one decision for a particular group altogether. This is an individual experience and perhaps momentary, as we shared, when you're dealing with really painful moments. Another piece is expressing your personal perspective, right? And this isn't just about speaking up just because someone is in the room, but literally understanding how a situation doesn't align to your personal values. And that's really important to state. Advocating also doesn't have to happen in the moment, right? Sometimes it's like, well, you didn't speak up, so you failed and you'll never be an ally. Sometimes it's helpful to diffuse a situation by asking for clarity. So asking, well, what did you mean by that? Can you share a little bit more context so that I can understand? You can also check in with someone afterward to say, hey, I noticed this moment. It made me uncomfortable. I wanted to ally for you, but I just wanted to check in. How did you feel about that moment? What can I do at another time in the future? Sometimes within the work context, you may not be equipped to be the person to address it. And so if need be, depending on your company, it may be most appropriate to reach out to your manager or a skip level manager or perhaps an HR business partner, depending on how you're taking in that particular incident. And honestly, the last and most important piece is that this isn't self-identified. Please don't go around saying, I'm an ally, I am this, and this is not to be recognized from yourself. This is for other people to recognize your allyship, and so it's not a performance. This is really back to my earlier point about building the trust, consistency, and accountability. Let someone thank you for allying them.
Yeah. That's awesome. I learned a few things in that too, right? So thank you for sharing that. I love what you said about allyship being a consistent effort. It takes time and trust built over that time. I love that. It's a lifelong journey. I also want to call out that there are, and you call this out too, that there are specific moments in time though that hit us a little harder, certain groups, and then like collectively as a society, like the one we're experiencing right now, in which like tragedy and injustice is like in our face, it's in the news, and that you can't ignore it. How can allies support their Black coworkers when there's injustice and tragedies that happen outside of work? What do they do then?
Yeah. That is a hot ticket question. So I'll share based on my perspective and the perspective of colleagues of mine whom I respect, and as a collective conversation that we've been having. First and foremost is to educate yourself and understand the context. If you're not Black, if you don't have the Black lived experience, and perhaps you may not be understanding the depth and the layers of what's going on today, doing the research to really seek to understand the issues and the experiences of the Black community during this time is first and foremost. There's so many resources out there, and so I think that it's not a lack of information, it's the effort in finding out this information. The second thing, checking in is super important, and I know that a lot of people have mentioned that, but I do want to clarify that the focus should be on your immediate network. And I say this because reaching out personally one-on-one is important, whether it's through email, through meeting, or whatever other communication device that you have. But that relationship should have already been built. It's not just walking up to any Black person saying, how are you doing? It has to be genuine. But also for managers, thinking about offering flexibility as you're checking in. So what does it look like to change a format of the meeting, or giving a day off, how people can show up off screen in this virtual environment, right? And perhaps easing into a meeting, not even having to be the first person to speak. That's one thing that I always think about. In terms of meetings, since I brought it up, explicitly acknowledging what's happening as a manager is really important. But the piece to add to that is also creating a moment where you're saying why this is a collective issue for all of us and not just for Black people. Racism is an issue for everyone, right? And so this is a part of the conversation where you invite people to share if they want and not necessarily point to, most of the time, unfortunately, the one or two people who may identify as Black on the team. And the last thing I'll say is honestly inviting the Black employees to share how they would like to be supported and not generalizing solutions. So there's no one cut solution for every single Black person. This is really about making sure that you're asking the questions, how can I support you, continually checking in, and be okay that you're not always going to have the answers. I feel like we have a tendency to want to solve systemic issues, and in this moment in time, actively listening and continually checking in is just as meaningful.
I love that. I work in consulting, right? And we're all about like solving problems, identifying the problem, and like it's it's well-meaning, and there's a space and a time and a space for that. And I love what you just mentioned, that like active listening is also an action that you can take, right? So finding the right time to offer the different kinds of support, and also making it specific to the individual. I think that's something that's been missing from some of the conversations that I've had with some folks, which is, it's how can we just like solve it now and solve it for everyone, and that's not the case.
Yeah, and one thing I would also add that I forgot to mention is knowing that when you're checking in, some people are going to need space and time to process. So be prepared to give that. They may not even want to talk about it, or some people may only want to talk about that. So just be prepared for that in terms of individual differences.
I love that. These are really good tips, I think, also for managers and leaders who it's their job, right, to care. And I'm using the word care strategically, right? It's your job to care for the people who work with you, and who you lead and guide, and offering that space, I think, is so important. Mm-hmm. Okay, so one last question for you. What can allies or people in support or want to be allies, what can they do right now to support their Black colleagues?
Well, I'd love to give an answer in terms of what we can do even externally across the world, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Please do.
Okay. I've been thinking a lot about this, and obviously everyone, hopefully a lot of people have heard, first and foremost, get involved, right? Beyond watching this, beyond watching different videos that you see circulating online, literally take action. So whether that's writing to public officials, writing a post of your aha moment, or sharing a post that someone else has written, learning about anti-Blackness, first and foremost, that's really important. Understanding what it looks like to be an active ally in a rally, or even donating, right? We have so many options here in terms of being active, but the point that I'll also drive home is that it should be continued advocacy. This isn't just a one-time action. This is continual. Another really important thing for me is to speak up when a Black person is being treated unjustly. And I say this in all seriousness and in all contexts. This is from the grocery store, if you are visiting a bank, if you are having to speak up from another fellow citizen, a police officer, any public official, speak up. And I say this because silence is the approval of negative actions. If we were in that same position, we would want someone to speak up for us, or if it's a family member, right? We want someone to say something. But I'll be really honest, we're not all extroverts, and a lot of times we just want to mind our own business and we want to keep it moving. But I encourage people to just be that someone, because this is the moment to continue advocating, but having this alert to really stand up for the unjustly actions that are taking place specifically within the Black community. A third thing I wanted to talk about is making sure to talk to your friends, your family, your children, or any other younger loved ones about anti-Blackness. I think we talk about it as a community, but I don't think we talk about it broadly in terms of the way that this manifests. I won't go into too much detail about it, but I think about systemic oppression, right? So this is unique in terms of the power at a structural level. There's a history in the United States in terms of who it benefits, and we need to acknowledge the history. It's true, it's there. One example that I usually tell people is considering the school to prison pipeline. For example, there is planning of prisons for the future that literally take place from the data in the reading scores and the number of Black boys going to detention as young as the 3rd grade. Like, that is problematic.
Yeah.
And these are things that people may not even notice, right? You may not even know about it. We're just moving along, but it's embedded in our society. And my big message to everyone is we have the opportunity to combat this, but we have to be intentional. If we don't take the time to learn about it, we're never going to understand. People have asked me, okay, so what are some examples, right? And so when I think about, well, what are examples to recognize anti-Blackness and how it manifests? A few examples would be food deserts, right? Commonly designed in Black neighborhoods in terms of not having access to supermarkets or farmers markets. This leads to long-term health impact. Another example would be housing, right? Even with the Fair Housing Act, there are continued reports of discrimination. And I'm not even going to get into the long list of details and history with that. But if no one has heard of it, I encourage you all to look into the word redlining and continue learning around that. Another example, and I'll end with this, is to share about beauty standards in the media. And let's also think about colorism across the globe. This is not a US issue. This is a global issue. For example, there are skin lightening creams being sold. That's problematic. Another example is the policing of Black hair for men and women. And so that's huge. And so when I think about these things, we have to start being intentional. We have to start having these conversations.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I, part of my foundational belief and what I want to share via the Cubicle Coach is that while as professionals we may want to focus on what will make our work lives more fulfilling and enriching, and we think that it has to do with just the activities that happen within the confines of our job, of our 9 to 5. And I hope that what I can convey to others over time is that that's not the case, right? Like we don't walk through magical doors or virtual doors right now, right? And like we drop our humanity, and the same is the case right now, right? The solutions, the answers to what you can do right now isn't just what you can do within the confines of your job, right? Or with your coworkers, that there are connections and impacts beyond just our careers and our work. So thank you so much, Nuhami.
Yeah. Can I leave you with some key takeaways?
Oh my gosh, yes, please.
Yeah. So a few questions that I've been challenging people in terms of being active and intentional are, one, when you think about from a company standpoint, ask yourself, are Black people being hired, paid, and promoted, right, at comparable rates as their counterparts? And if not, how can you advocate and actually make the change?
Yeah.
Another simple question to ask yourself and to start doing your research is, who are the policymakers in your city or your state? And we all love to talk about this. This is what drives a lot of things in this earth. Where are you spending your money? Mm-hmm. Right? And so if you're really trying to disrupt anti-Blackness, support small and large Black-owned businesses.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. All right. Well, thank you again, Nuhami. I hope that we can discuss some more at a later date, but I want to thank you for taking some time to educate some folks on what they can do right now.